This is just for the drop-down mechanism and reverse lights. First, you got to figure out what monitor and camera you're going to use. Remember, the camera has to fit in a spot that's about 1.3 inches wide, 1.2 inches high, and 1.5 inches deep. But remember also, since you have 1.2 inches of height, only about 0.8 inches of that actually sticks out from the bottom. So you don't have all that for viewing. For the monitors that come with these cameras, you can have suction cup mounts to the dash, rear view mirrors that replace your rear view mirror and have a light in a monitor inside the rear view mirror, or you can do a Wi-Fi setup to your phone or tablet. Although those are a bit more manual, you have to manually pull up the picture with those. They're not quite as automatic, and I feel like they're more problematic. Or do what I did and do the pop-up from the speaker grill, but I do not have a kit for that. That is way more intensive, requires pulling the dash and adding supports and a lot more work. Now for turning these bags of parts into an assembled kit, you'll have to supply your own tag light, which looks like this right here. First thing you can do is take this lens off, take these screws out, take this out. We're not going to use any of those. You're going to take this bracket and you're going to cut the top off. And you're going to cut it as close to the top here as possible, leaving as much of that ledge as possible. But you don't want any overhang. You want this to be perfectly straight up and down all the way around. You want to trim that around and then sand obviously all the edges off, get this pretty smooth, and then throw paint over it. When this came stock, when I got out of the box, it was this gold color. I painted it silver just so that it kind of matched the front if you saw any of it through. We're not going for NCRS here, so I don't care that it's gold or not. Also, if you get an assembled kit, I'm doing these by hand. So you can see here, I don't cut exactly straight. I kind of dipped it a little too far there, but whatever. None of this shows. If you want this perfectly straight, buy an assembled kit and do this yourself. So the aftermarket tag light assembly I got here is the one made by CA. Just so you know which one I used in mine. Once you cut the top off, next you have to modify this lens. Here you can see the one on top is not modified. The one on the bottom is. You can, I don't know how easy it is to see in the camera here, but these little nubs are ground off at an angle here on the bottom modified one here. So all of these nubs you want to ground off. And the reason why is because you want this to fit and slide in. The stock one, it gets screwed in, so it's fine if it's tight. Well, we want it to slide. So this one, you notice when it goes through, the angle that it's set at, it'll actually pass through. So you want to ground this down a little, maybe even take a little off the edges so that this will slide through and attach to your plate. Another optional point is I found on mine that I wanted to trim down a little and back a little here on this point because it didn't want to set flush up against my tag trim bracket. So I trimmed those with just a little bit. You can't even probably hardly see it in the video, but something to do before you paint it. And then obviously I painted the whole back just to cover up the metal that I exposed. And what you're going to want to do is take one of these screws and run it through these 4 holes here, just to kind of make threads in the plastic here with the point into the screw. Then next you're going to take 4 of those screws and you're going to shorten them, and they're going to look kind of like this. You're basically going to make them the length of the lens and this bottom body here. That's about where you want them. And then how I do that is I just have a chunk of metal here with a hole in it, about the right length. I stick it on there on the grinder until it's about flat, and then another chunk of metal here with a hole in it, and put it on a grinder at an angle, spin it with a screwdriver until you kind of take the edges off. So now you have something that'll actually start in a hole, and basically you have a custom screw here that'll has threads all the way to the end, but still the aggressive screws, so you don't have the tip there, because you can't have it sticking out the other side of this. You want it to be flush, but still have all the bite that we can get. So now I have to remove all the supports if there's any still stuck on any of the plastic. Things like this. This just comes right off. You may have to take a razor blade or something to knock some of that off, but most of it will come right off. It's not horribly important. See, like this, that pops right off. Most of them are pretty obvious, but the ones that are kind of important to pay attention to are the back of the pods. So the back of the pods, the actual top of the pod, I put them upside down. So the top of the pod has some support material on it probably. So you may have to take a blade here and trim off just the top of that, those little nubs on all 3 of these nubs. And then you want to make sure that it fits flush into this slider. Also, you can take a 1/4-inch bit through each of these holes and through these holes. So the slider body and the main base, you put a 1/4-inch drill bit through there because I want that to be as close as fit as possible. And actually what you do is you put a 1/4-inch bit through one, and then a nut and a bolt through that one, and then a 1/4-inch bit through the other to make sure that everything lines up. So every time you put this together, it goes together the same way. Otherwise, you may end up with alignment issues if things shift around on you because that hole's too big. Then the other things to pay attention to are underneath the top here. Make sure that these rails are clear. Otherwise, your slider won't work. One key thing here is only something this small will work. If you try to use something like this screwdriver, which looks small, it is too big and you'll end up popping those rails off. And you want to keep those on there if you're going to use these rail adapters. So making sure that all of the material is out of there, and the same for all of these adapters. So like here, sliding this little tiny screwdriver in there and making sure all of that material is out. And then once that material is popped out, you should be able to slide these rails into there. I didn't finish cleaning this one, so it's not going to slide, but they should slide in there. Also, while you're at it, one of the things you can do is make sure that this area here is cleaned out, and that whatever your camera is, that your camera wire will fit in there. Now is the time, if you need to enlarge that a little bit, you need to put a drill bit in there and make that a little bit bigger. One more important area to clean out is to make sure that there's nothing underneath here or nothing under here. Sometimes there's some supports still stuck under here where the wire goes. And if there's still stuff in there, you won't be able to feed the wire. There's this piece right there. See, like that little piece right there? You want to make sure all that's cleared out as much as you can get. Once you have these plates and these trimmed up, you want to make sure that this goes on and that this fits absolutely smooth. See, like this doesn't go on all the way because I haven't finished trimming it. You want that to be all the way smooth because that's your alignment between your pod and your slider. When you do glue these together, it's best to clamp it to make sure they're nice and flush once you get this all trimmed. But also notice that this clamp fits inside the pod here, so I can get a good clamp on it. This little clamp here does not. So that's not great. It might end up tilting the pod a little like that instead of getting it nice and flush. So making sure you have something to hold these together nice and tight, and better to clamp in the middle here than to try and do it like this, because you still might get a bow in the middle because there's no support there. So it's best if you can find some small clamps like that to get that really down tight. Also remember, when you're mounting your camera in here, only about 0.8 inches of it sticks out when it drops down. So you don't have the full view, so don't put your camera way up here. It's got to be way down at the bottom. Once you figure out how you're going to mount this, and you know which pod you're going to use, you're going to glue that pod to the back plate here. I tried to include some ABS glue here, but it's not exactly meant to be packaged like this, so I have no idea if this is going to work or if this is going to dry out. If it dries out and doesn't work, you're going to have to go buy your own ABS glue. Sorry, I tried. It does work really well, at least when it's new, for applying this, rather than the dauber that comes with the ABS cement. This is really easy to squirt on the back here, and then you clamp and attach to the slider. One of the first things you have to figure out is what kind of camera you have and how you're going to make it fit in your pod. I tried these flush fit cameras, and that's the cleanest install, but it wouldn't work with my monitor. This is actually the cleanest look and gives you the most room for wires, but you have to figure out what works for your system. And also, they come with different ends, some of RCA, some of this little plug. The camera I ended up getting only had this plug, and I plugged into RCA. It didn't work right. So I was stuck using this and had to use a different style camera. Also, sometimes they'll come with different mounts that you can unscrew the face and make it a flush mount. So that's the cleanest look. You can also do a flush mount on one of these adapters. So this adapter slides in to the top and mounts inside this generic pod, open pod. And I have a few different mount options here that basically you have to figure out how to make your camera fit and glue it into one of these, or do something to attach it. So the next best way to do it, what I took was I took this right here, and the rails slide in, and my camera, I made this size so that my camera is a square camera, fits right into those sides, like friction fit. And then I basically took some of the ABS glue and glued all the way around it. Now, the camera case may not be ABS, so I'm not really sure that it bonded to the camera. That doesn't really matter. I kind of surrounded it so it can't go anywhere, and there's really no forces on it. Now, that could have gone right into this generic camera mount, generic pod here, and been fine. But it will fit in there. But if you can make it fit, the next cleanest install is, so we do this one-handed, is to line your camera up so it sneaks out that hole. So that's almost as good as the flush mount. If you can get your camera to sit up in there in one of these other mounts and fit behind the flush mount pod. So you got to figure out which pod you want so that you can glue the pod to the slider. All right, kind of an optional step that I kind of strongly suggest makes it easier is take the ABS glue and go around each of these captured nuts. What it does is it makes sure that these don't pop out when you're putting pressure on them, especially these from the bottom side, because they're lock nuts, nylocks. You have to put a little bit of pressure to get the screwdriver to go through. This is what it looks like after it's done. Doesn't have to be perfect. If you get all on the threads, it's not that big a deal. Doesn't stick to the threads great anyway, but it does melt to the ABS. It doesn't really stick to the nut real well, but it kind of captures it. It encases it so that it can't pop out. If you absolutely needed to, you could probably push them out, but it keeps them in place during assembly pretty well. Then you're going to put this together, and you're also going to use these assembly spacers. So what these spacers do is they mimic about the width, at least the width of my car, probably similar to yours, of the car when it's installed. So when these go on, these clamp around your license plate trim and also a piece of fiberglass that you don't have here when assembling. So this kind of gives you an idea of what it's going to look like when it's assembled in the car. Now what you're going to do is you're going to tighten all these, and you're going to tighten these up, unlike what I've done here. And then you slide the slider in, and you take whichever mount you're planning on using and kind of test fit it. Make sure it fits easy in there, and you make sure it fits flush. It should fit flush against the slider. I've already trimmed this one and then run a 1/4-inch bit through those holes, and this should slide easily. Next, you are going to put your top piece here and your camera mount in here. So you're going to make sure your camera fits in here, and with all these tight, make sure this slides up and down, and that you have room here. It's not sticking out or anything, and that you have nothing hanging up. So now is the time where if you have any of these lips sticking out, especially in the back here, if this back has a lip, it could catch on the slider. There's a decent amount of distance there, but still, you don't want anything catching. Yeah, see how just had a nut fall out because these aren't glued in. But anyway, and then now you also take these longer bolts, go through that, and then this anti-slip gasket here. So what this does is when you tighten these together, this bottom here is the adjustment up, down, left, right. And when you tighten that together, it helps keep this from slipping on this, gives it a little bit of grip. So you're going to assemble all this together, tighten that up, get this plate here centered in your opening, and you tighten those up. And then when you tighten this whole assembly up, now you should be able to move it by hand, which mine isn't tight, but once it's tightened all up and lined up, this whole assembly should slide easily in and out. Now is the time where you need to make sure this all clears and to make sure that there aren't any issues. See, like here, actually, you can see this one. I haven't done it yet. See how the middle here touches? And I have room on the edge. I found this to be common, that this middle part is actually dented, pulled in. So you just got to grab it and pull it out a little bit, just so that I get the same travel all the way through. Then when you have this assembled, you're going to take your lens here and you're going to screw it on with your shortened screws. So we're going to set everything up and make sure this goes cleanly in and out. Now, it doesn't have to go all the way through. It only has to go to the lens is about flush here. And it's going to angle. Angles on purpose. It has an angle slightly this way to point the light towards the tag. And you want it to be able to go to, I don't know, I need to trim this lens a little bit more. But basically about there. So the lens, this part of the lens is just about flush with this. So this lens actually needs to be trimmed a little bit more so that it slides in and out easy here. But now is when you do that. You have this all assembled, all tightened up, and you test the slide by hand, and then you adjust whatever you need to adjust to make sure it goes in and out and it goes up to a point that you're happy with. And actually even a little beyond is better to make sure there's clearance, and then you just adjust it down a little bit. Now with everything tightened down, especially these body screws, I know it's a pain, but get them tight so that everything lines up right. And then these 3 screws here, and then first align just the bottom plate, this bottom plate here, screwed to this, made that go smoothly in and out. Then I had to do a little bit more grinding on this than I did on another one. So grinding on this edge and those nubs all the way around to get this to fit smoothly in here. Assemble them both and make sure that your whole slider assembly now slides in and out smoothly without hitting. If it's binding, it's not going to work. Also, this particular one, I had to take and just grab it with my hands and pull this out. Took a bit of force, but pull that out a little bit. Also, in the back here, some of these were angled in a little. I had to kind of bend that out and that out on the sides a little bit there to keep them from hitting. But now I have this nice and smooth. Also remember, so when this goes up, right now it goes that far up, but it's not going to go, that's not where we're going to leave it. We don't want it that far above this edge here. We want it about there because you don't want it to hang up trying to open on this ledge. And stock is right about there. So the lens right, and actually usually it's sticking down a little bit, but we'll probably adjust it right about there is where you want it. Just where this lens is just about flush there. Notice it's inside here, but on the back side of the car, it'll be just about flush. That's about where it's going to be. So from there down is we want it to be smooth. Also at this point, you should have already figured out which pod you want and glued that to the slider here because it's kind of hard to check this fit with this just falling off. So these two are glued together, so this is your final fit. Also, if this angle is off at all, either left, right, or forward, back, and you need it to be different at all, how you do that is you take this off and you take this bottom piece and sand it. Put it on something flat, either a belt sander or just a sandpaper on a piece of 1x6 or something, and run this back and forth and sand it either whatever direction you need it to be to get this to be level with this. Next, you're going to take a knife and cut right about there. Right about there through the plastic to expose those pieces, not all the way through, and then bend it and peel that off so that you can get to those 2 points. And you're going to solder on a white and a ground, a negative black wire to those 2 points. Get the heat shrink out, a piece that just barely fits over the LED strip there. And then take some alcohol, clean that channel out so it sticks a little better. Stick it to this. Sticking it's probably fine, it'll probably stay, but I take and put a little bit of ABS glue there too just to help keep it in there. And then I route the wires like this. The reason I do that is it gives you a little bit of slack, because you're not going to have room for slack in the pod area, but we have a little bit of room up here. So give myself a little bit of slack. Then over here, the solder joint that we need for the black and the blue wires, this heat shrink will be a longer piece that you'll cut in half and use those two pieces for. And then the little pieces that we need to cover these spade terminals will be from this heat shrink that will cut into three places. This heat shrink has the glue on it. This heat shrink has the glue on it. This does not. This is just kind of to cover this. This isn't really totally waterproof. So now you want to plug the spade terminals into the relay. So you can see here, these are the two that trigger the relay. One gets a ground, the other gets a blue wire. Blue wire is the reverse positive. And then the ground jumpers to two of these catty corner, and then the positive that comes in goes to the other two catty corner. These two are open because this is what goes to the relay, the actuator, once we get that hooked up. So the point here is we want to lay these wires out so they lay nicely together. And then these three now go through the top. White one doesn't matter, it's open on the end, so we have whatever we need there. What's important here is the blue and the black. So then we we solder to the short end of the header pins. And what we do here is on one side, these are all blacks, these are all ground. On the other side, the first two it doesn't matter which one's which. The first two are the blue wires, so these are going to be our reverse lights. Are these back two? And then I do those from the outside, so the wires on the outside of the pins, and this wire's on the outside of the pins. And then through the middle of the pins of the white wire come through, and then do a 90, and then solder that white one here, and that's the tag light. So now the tag light will be the first pair, and then the reverse lights will be the next two pair. And then what I'll do is I'll put a little bit of liquid electrical tape on the back side of this just to keep these from touching anything. You could probably use the ABS glue too. That'll probably do just fine. But I have liquid electrical tape, so I'll go ahead and use that. And now that we have this end and this end terminated, lay the wires nice, and then cut these all to the same length. And then we're going to crimp on the terminals for the main harness here, the main plug. And then we can put all this stuff in the wire looming. Now you cut the wire loom to length if necessary, but you're going to have to peel this up a little bit and push some of that wire through, because how you load this is you push that through to plug these in and then pull it back up to the top, and then you can put that wire loom on. But we won't do that till much later. Right now, to assemble, the next thing you have to do is cut the reverse lights, one to about 5 inches, one to about 3 inches, and then cut the remaining up here leave about an inch. That's about it, overhang, and then crimp on these little tiny pins onto all of these. What this is going to be is the 1.6. So that's the one I got to use here. It's really tiny, and make sure these are crimped on well. Also, probably take a little tiny screwdriver to jam these up in there. These wires just barely fit in there, but they do fit. Make sure they go up in there and they lock all the way in. Now we put in the reverse lights. The longer one goes in the passenger side. There's a little slot here for that wire to go into, to go across here. When routing these wires for the backup cameras, come down on the left side of the passenger light here and come down in the front. So what's going to happen is you're going to plug it in here and then push it back up on the back side. So come down out here and plug them in. So now when you've got these plugged in here, you've got reverse light, tag light, and then you should be able to wiggle these in right up there as you close this up. And don't forget the anti-slip gasket here. Remember, the tag light goes in the last set of pins, and then the two reverse lights go on the first two set of pins. And you just have to match up the ground, so you can see the ground wire here is on this side. You match the ground on all these pins to the left side. And then once you get those plugged in, then you pull on this wire here to slide that whole mess up inside, and then that's how you get it together. And you terminate those and add this plug. And if you opted to build a test harness, I kind of recommend, I included extra clips and pins so that you could do that. You'll have to supply your own wires and switch and battery and whatever if you opt to do that. But now we're at the point where those are connected, and I can test the tag light, make sure it comes on, and then we can test the reverse lights. Also, you can hear that the relay is clicking, and you can see the little indicator light there for the relay. We don't have the actuator hooked up yet, but we can test that all this works. Now I'm going to start connecting more of this stuff. And then once that's together, and again, you want to make sure this is nice and smooth. And your adjustment is loosening these two nuts here, these two screws, and then making sure that when you tighten them down, this is centered here, so it's nice and smooth in and out, and doesn't hit. Again, if you need to do any more trimming or a little bit of bending or whatever to get it to clear, that should move freely. With the actuator, you're going to get 2 of these U-bolts and 2 of these. We're only going to use one set, so we will use one of the U-bolts and then one of those through bolts. For this bolt here, there's 2 of these. There's a 25 millimeter and 30 millimeter, so 25 is what you use up on top here. This is the 30, and this is what we're going to use on the bottom, all the way through there. This, we are going to do this spacer over the end, and then the actuator into the tower here, and then you use the longer 30 millimeter bolt here to go through the tower, through the spacer inside, and through the end of the actuator, and then into the nut holder here, which I have added the ABS glue to hold. So now you can just screw on this to tighten it down. This is your up, down, final adjustment to get this to sit exactly where you want it to be. It's probably going to basically be all the way up, but if different servo links may change things. And then you're going to want to take your zip ties and go underneath this left to right, and then top to bottom. And then that's where you're going to zip tie in the relay. It's going to hold the relay there. And then your wiring harness, you have another zip tie go into that, and hold your wiring harness there. So the point of this angle is supposed to be hopefully to avoid the the backup lights that are right here for the 67s. And also not go straight up and hit the back of the deck because there's fiberglass like right here in the car. So hopefully this will route the wire in a decent direction once we're done. Then you want to cut off the end of the wire that came on the actuator, and you need to crimp on the little spade terminals. When I do that though, I start with using the right crimp tool here, but the problem is these little tiny wires are a little small and this doesn't get it tight enough. So I start with that, and then I go to this other jaw here, which crimps it way tighter. It's not exactly meant for this, I don't think, but it gets it nice and tight so that you can use these little tiny wires in the spade terminal. And then you're going to want to plug that into the last 2 spaces that we had available in our relay, which is going to be this one and the one directly under it. Basically, pick a direction, stick them on, positive, negative, doesn't matter, and then see if it's right. Connect the power up to the lead and see if it's up or down or up. And then if it's backwards, just flip the terminals, because one is positive, negative up, and the other one is negative, positive down. And also it may vary depending on different manufacturers. So just pick a direction. If it doesn't work, flip it. Put your lens back on and make sure everything still works. And now you have an assembled kit. You'll have your camera inside, and you may have the other pod. And for anybody that already has backup lights and doesn't want them in this for whatever reason, even though these are much brighter than whatever we have stock, I have these two little plugs. They go from the inside out. So you use a little bit of that ABS glue just to glue these in place instead of putting the lights in, just to plug the holes if you really don't want the backup lights for whatever reason. The kit assembled. We have the tag light, and then the backup lights and camera drop down.